Okay, so now we're going to look at how do I go from finding the same slope, keeping the same slope, to actually writing the parallel line equation. So I need to be parallel to the line 2 times the value of y minus 6 times the value of x is equal to -2. And I also have to pass through the point -3, -5. Well, the first thing I need to do is find a slope. You are always going to need to find a slope. That way you know if you're going to keep the same slope. We got to know what our slope is. So I'm going to say 2y equals -2. And now I need to decide, do I add or subtract 6x to both sides? And I should add because that is a minus or -6x. So I'm going to add 6x to both sides. And then I'm going to end up dividing by 2. So I'm going to have y equals, that's going to be 1, so -1, and 6 divided by 2 is 3, so plus 3x. Okay, so I need my slope. And because it's in y equals mx plus b, I know that my slope is 3 for this graph line. Now I need to know, because it's parallel, I am going to keep the same slope. So my final slope answer in my y equals mx plus b has to be the exact same as this slope. And this slope is 3. So I want to keep the same slope. So I know that my slope is going to be a +3. So I've already started writing my final equation over here, my final answer. So my slope is going to be 3. So I've started my equation already. Y equals 3x. I just don't know what my y-intercept is. You cannot use the same y-intercept as this equation over here. You are going to have to find a new y-intercept. And here is how we do this. We are going to take y equals mx plus b, and we are going to plug in our slope. We are going to plug in an input value, and we are going to plug in an output value. And we've got to know, where do I find my input and output value? It's coming from the ordered pair they gave you. You have an input value, -3. You have an output value, -5. And you have a slope. You want to use the slope you are using in your final answer. So all I have to do is plug in my output value for y, -5. My slope is 3. And my input value is -3. And now we're going to do some math, and we are going to solve for b, which is exactly what I said on the front of the notes when it said, how do I find b, the y-intercept? Plug in the slope, plug in the input and output values, and solve for b. All right, so we're going to bring down the -5 because there is no math to do there. But I can do the math here. What is 3 times -3? -9 plus b, the y-intercept. All right, so I want to solve for b, so that means I have to move this -9 to the other side. Am I going to add 9 or subtract 9? You're going to add 9 to both sides. And now my y-intercept, my starting point for my graph line, is going to be, what do I get when I add 9 to -5? I get 4. So my y-intercept is going to be 4, which means my final answer equation is y equals 3x plus 4. But I want to be able to check my work and know that all the math that I did for my slope and all the math I did for my y-intercept in my final answer is correct. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to go to our calculator. We're going to clear our memory, 2nd plus 7, 1, 2. And we're going to go to y equals, because I want to check that they're parallel. And it's easier to see if lines are parallel if I graph them. So I'm going to go to y equals, and I'm going to type in both equations, the equation I rearranged and the equation that I came up with, that I created. So I'm going to say -1 plus 3x and 3x plus 4. And I'm going to hit graph. And if they're parallel, I should see that these lines do not intersect. And those lines look parallel to me. So because they are parallel, check, I know that my final slope answer of 3 is correct. Check. Okay, but now I need to check that my y-intercept math was correct. And that's going to tell me I'm going to use this point to check my y-intercept. So I'm going to go back to my y equals screen, and I'm going to erase the equation that is not my final answer. So I'm going to erase -1 plus 3x, the equation that I rearranged. I want to see my final answer here because I need to make sure my final answer has the point -3, -5 in its table. So I'm going to go to second graph to check my point, and I need to go up to the input value of -3 and make sure my output value is -5. If the point you need to pass through shows up in your table, you know that you have gotten the correct y-intercept. So I have checked my slope by graphing both lines to see if they're parallel, and I checked my y-intercept by only having my final answer in y equals and going to the table to check the point. All right, I'm going to clear my memory, and we're going to try another one. All right, this time I have 3 times the value of y minus 2 times the value of x is equal to negative 30, and it has to pass through 12,4. My final answer has to pass through 12,4. So I'm going to solve for y so that I can get my slope. So I've got 3y equals negative 30 plus 2x. Divide by 3. So I've got y equals negative 10 plus 2 is not going to divide evenly by 3, and it's not going to simplify. So I'm going to have plus 2/3 x. Well, I rearranged this so that I could get, again, my slope. And if it's parallel, I know they are going to keep the same slope. So I know the slope in my final answer is going to be a positive 2/3. So I'm going to go ahead and start writing my final answer here. Y equals x. And my slope is going to be 2/3. The exact same slope that I got here because that's what's going to make them parallel. Okay, now I need a y-intercept for my final answer. And can I use this y-intercept here? No. You have to solve for your own y-intercept. And we're going to do that just like we did above. We're going to plug in an input, an output value, and we're going to plug in our slope into y equals mx plus b. All right, so I know my slope has to go here, and it's going to be 2/3. All right, y equals, so this has to be a y value. I need an output value, so that's why I go to my point. It has an input and output pair. So my output value is 4. And now I need an input value to replace the x. So where am I going to get my input value from? From my ordered pair. So my input value is 12. And now I'm going to do math. So I've got 4 equals. I'm going to multiply because maybe we struggle with fractions and multiplication. So I'm going to type in 2/3 times 12. And I got 8. So I have 8 plus b. All right, now to move that 8, do I add or subtract 8? You're going to subtract 8 from both sides. And you're going to get negative 4 equals the y-intercept. So my line, if I was graphing this, is going to start at the point 0, negative 4, and it's going to move up to right 3 since my slope is positive. All right, so let's finish off our final answer. So I want to say my final answer is y equals 2/3 x minus 4 because my y-intercept is negative. But I need to go to my calculator and I need to check that these lines are parallel, and then I need to check that my math is correct for my y-intercept. So I'm going to go to y equals, and I'm going to type in both equations, 2/3 x, and then I'm going to type in the one I created. So I'm going to say 2/3 x minus 4, and I'm going to hit graph. And if my lines are parallel, that tells me that my slope was calculated correctly, that when I rearranged, I got the correct slope, and I knew to keep the same slope. They look parallel to me, so I know that 2/3 is the correct slope, and these lines are parallel. Now I want to check my y-intercept. So go back to y equals, and I only leave in my final answer equation, and I go to the table, and I want to check to see, does the point 12,4 show up in my table? So I'm going to go down to 12. Move this over here so you can see the point. I want to see 12,4. I have an input value of 12, an output value of 4. So yes, this point is on this graph line. So I know that my math is correct and my y-intercept is negative 4. All right, let's look at these last couple of examples. All right, write the equation of a line that passes through the point 6, negative 6 and is parallel to the x-axis. Okay, guys, here is your x-axis right here. All right. If you are parallel to the x-axis, that makes you a Hoy line, not a Vux. Okay, so let's review. What does Hoy tell me? Hoy tells me that H, the graph, is a horizontal line. So remember, the first letter tells you about the graph. The middle letter tells you about the slope. What is the slope of a Hoy line? It is 0. And the third letter tells you how to write the equation. So how do we write the equation for a Hoy line? It is y equals the output value. Okay, one of these 3 things is going to be what they're asking me for. They're either asking me for the equation, the slope, or the graph. Well, this says write the equation. So I need this to help me get my final answer. So I know that my equation for a Hoy line is going to be y equals, and now I just need an output value. Well, do I have an output value? I sure do. Look at this point, 6, -6. I just need to know which one is the output value. And if you know where y is in an ordered pair, it's the second number. Your output value is -6. There is your equation for a line that is parallel to the x-axis and has has the point 6, -6 on its graph line. But I'm going to graph this by hand to check my math and check my thinking. So first thing I'm going to do, take the equation. This letter tells you what axis to go to. I'm going to go to the y-axis at -6, and I'm going to make a point. And because I know this is a Hoy line, I know which grid line to trace so that my graph is in the correct direction. Horizontal. Do those lines look parallel? Check. Okay. Now I want to see if the point is on the graph line that I sketched. That's here. And so I'm going to plot the point 6, -6. So I go to 6 and I go down 6. And what do you know? That point, 6, -6, is on the graph line. So it satisfies both. I know that I have the correct final Hoy horizontal equation. So now we're going to look at here. Write the equation of the line that passes through the point -6, 4 and is parallel to the y-axis. Okay, parallel. I know I have to keep the same slope. So here's the y-axis. And the y-axis is what kind of line? A Vux line, which means my slope is going to have to be the same as the slope of a vertical line. So now I'm going to go through my 3 letters. The V tells me that my graph line has to be vertical because the y-axis is vertical and they have to be in the same direction. The middle letter, the U, tells me that my slope has to be undefined because the y-axis has an undefined slope and they have to have the same slope. The third letter tells me how to write the equation of a vertical line, x. That's what that letter's there for, to remind me that my equation is x equals an input value. So now I need to ask myself, what are they asking me for? Are they asking me for a graph picture? Are they asking me about the slope? Or are they asking me to write the equation of this vertical line? And if I go back and read, they say write the equation of the line, equation. So this is going to tell me how to get to my final answer. It's going to be x equals, and now I just need an input value. Where am I going to get my input value from? My ordered pair. My input value is -6. So my final answer is x equals -6. And I'm going to graph this by hand to check my work. So I've got to go to the x-axis at -6 and make a point. And because I know how a vertical line is drawn, I know which direction to trace my grid line. I've got to trace it so that it is parallel to the y-axis. They are parallel. Check, check. I now need to plot the point -6, 4 and make sure that that point shows up on my graph line, and it does. So I know that I have the correct final vertical line equation. And that is how you write parallel lines. They have to keep the same slope.